Hi, I'm Margie Basso with Eastlink TV, and we're here today at Montecarn Estate Winery on Black Sage Road, and it's one of our most recent wineries that have opened up in Oliver. I have here with me Luke Whittle today, and we're going to talk about wine with Luke. So Luke, we can start off and we're going to talk about aromas and tastes of wine.
Yeah, a lot of wines labels and wine descriptions will have sort of things, flavors that you'll sort of get from other sources. So you'll see things like, oh, this wine has strawberry aromas, or aromas of coffee, or chocolate, or things like that. Yeah, and a lot of people think that those wines, those flavors are added to the wine, and this is really about. Well, they're not, basically. That's why nobody goes potato touring. Nobody goes, nobody tastes their tater tot and goes, wow, there's a certain iron-rich complexity to this potato that suggests, North Cavendish side of PEI instead of, the South Montague side. Grapes actually have these chemicals in them that produce flavors and aromas that we interpret as being, wow, that sort of smells like strawberries, or wow, that sort of smells like coffee, or wow, that sort of smells like rhubarb or cranberries, and that's a natural part of the wine. It's not something that a winery will add to the wine. It's not something that is sort of synthetic in any way. That's just what grapes do when they're fermented, and it's magical. It's wonderful.
Now, when you see something like that that's on the label, then it most likely is coming from the winery itself, from the winemakers or the tasters at that winery. They're making that decision of what they feel the flavor, the value that's coming through their wine.
Depending on the size of the winery, it could be the winemaker himself or the owner themselves. It could be the winery's marketing department. It could be the winemaking team. It could be a whole section of people. It could be it could be the president. It could be anybody really who's writing that. Most likely, it starts originally with the winemaker. He'll sort of put his notes out about, or her notes about, what they get in each bottle of wine, or what they sense on it, and there's no one who's more familiar with that wine than the winemaker, really. So you'd expect that they would know what they are getting and have a very sensitive nose about it. And it's really all about the nose. It's really, I see a lot of people who, for the first time they'll take a wine and then they'll just pound it back. Whereas it's good to be able to take your time and just be able to smell the wine. Sometimes you see people swirling their glasses. That's exactly what we do to release those aromas and release those compounds in the wine so that you can appreciate it.
And I think that's probably what I find the most intimidating component of wine tasting. We have so many beautiful wineries in our area. We're so fortunate. But then there is really a certain etiquette that comes along. And as a novice, and there's many people that, will come out for the first time, they want to go wine tasting, and they're not too sure what they're supposed to do. So let's go through that. You said a lot of it is through, obviously, a majority of your senses, but because you can use your visual senses as well, just to be able to look at the components of the wine, the quality of the color, whether it's dark or light, to be able to tell the difference with that. But there is a smelling component, and then there's a tasting component. So you mentioned about the smelling component and the swirling, and maybe you can just go over that again.
Sure. Basically, when you want to taste a wine for the first time, you'd pick it up and look at it. Is there anything floating in it? Is there anything, is it cloudy? Is it clear? What color is it? There's all kinds of things, indicators that will tell you exactly what happens, basically, when you're, basically what it can indicate either the quality, or it can indicate the winemaking style, or it can indicate where a wine comes from or how old it is, where, that kind of thing. That will give you an indication of what you're going to taste or smell coming up. So that basically, if I were to sort of guess about what I was going to smell just by looking at it, I would sort of guess that it's probably going to be a nice light, dry table wine, which is exactly what it says on the label. So if I put my nose in the glass and I start smelling huge amounts of honey, and it's very thick, then I would expect this to be an ice wine, but it's not, because I saw it came out of another bottle. So my expectations would be different, basically, depending on what it looks like. So just looking at the wine can really set up what it is that you think you're going to be smelling. And it is easy to be intimidated by this kind of thing. I don't know if everyone remembers that scene from Sideways where he starts smelling and he gets, 10 different descriptors of, strawberries and a hint of, blue cheese and rubber boot. And, I mean, it gets ridiculous after a while. And so with this kind of thing, when I used to smell wine, when I was getting into it, oh, it smells like wine. There wasn't really anything else I could really say about it. It was only when I started, really researching it a little more and sort of practicing it and studying, and you do have to practice, where you can kind of go, okay, well, there's like a lemon drop kind of aroma to that. It smells like some wines will smell like the Hall's candies, the Hall's lemon, or the cherry, sort of a cherry drop kind of thing. With this one, there's all kinds of, there's a bit of a lemony quality, kind of a lemon lime zest kind of thing. And you notice I'm swirling the wine every time. That's basically to release all those aromas. I'm basically letting out those aromas that are dissolved in the wine, and I'm letting them be released by swirling it around with oxygen. And basically, I'll put my nose in the glass and just smell it.
So you're going to just swirl it. See, I'm always worried that I'm going to swirl it right out of my glass, and that would be terribly embarrassing.
You know what? If you're worried, just put it on the bar.
Yes.
And just swirl it a little bit like that. You don't even have to pick it up. You just swirl it around like that.
Okay, and then and I'm somewhat nose challenged, so I have a smaller nose, and then I feel like how much of my nose am I actually putting in? You're just tipping it?
Yeah, you can add some glasses. You put your nose right in the glass. Not a problem at all.
And I think for part of it too is, like you say, it is a comparison thing. And this is the wonderful thing about wine, is that it does encourage you to do it with other people and to be able to make it it's a huge social aspect. So what I see it as an educator is that there's a learning continuum. And for myself, I would put myself at the bottom end of the continuum, where I'm like you, where you said, okay, I really don't know what I'm doing and what I'm supposed to be smelling, but it comes with experience and it comes with conversation with other people. What do you smell? Oh, okay, now I can kind of see that. And yeah, that's true, but I also smell this. So it's going back and forth and having that conversation and then comparing it to something else. Because of course, really being able to identify what's in this white wine without anything to compare to is very, very difficult.
That's right.
So now going from there, because I know sometimes I've seen people that I considered much more prestigious than myself when it comes to wine tasting, they practically are snorting the wine. Like they really are taking deep, to the point where I'm thinking they're going to, inhale some of it through their nasal system. And so, is that just because they really want to get a strong aroma, or that's, everybody sort of has their own technique?
Yeah, everyone has their own technique and everyone has their own sensitivity. So while I smelled this and I smelled lemon and sort of a vanilla toasty component to it, someone else might smell it and instead of getting lemons, they might get a real pronounced orange aroma. They might have a different sensitivity to it. It's still citrusy, right? So there's still lemons or things like that. There's still kind of a citrusy note to it. So that's why sometimes in magazines they'll be a little bit more general. They won't really specify lemon or lime or orange or anything like that. But basically, everyone has also learned a different technique. Sometimes with that kind of thing, it's really just who showed you how to taste. Did you just learn on your own, or did you learn by watching a television program, or did you watch a movie and this is what happened, or did you take a class where someone showed you? There is a bit of a technique to it. It is kind of different with everybody. I mean, everyone's noses are different. Everyone basically smells different things and their different sensitivities. So whatever works for you. For me personally, I like to dive right in. I like my nose in the glass. And then sometimes I'll actually, and this is a trick that I just learned actually about a year ago, someone suggested just open your mouth slightly. Let air in that way too. And you'd be surprised, the aromas get in there and they get into your sinuses, and that's exactly where you want them because that's where you sense it. When we taste wine, we only really have 5 tastes, right? Or 4 maybe, depending on who you believe. 5 senses, right? Sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. And we can discount salty right away, and we can pretty well discount umami right away. So that leaves us with the sweet, sour, and bitter. And all of those things, that's 3 things that we're going to be tasting with. So why are we getting all these sort of complexities of flavor? Well, that comes from those same things that we volatilize, that we make basically evaporate by swirling in the glass. That's all those things are volatilizing in our mouth, and then it goes up into our sinuses, and that's where we sense it. So it's not so much that we're tasting the wine as much as we're drinking it and smelling it inside.
And of course, that all is then becomes a little bit more layered depending on what you're eating with that when you're tasting, and you know how you're going from one tasting to another tasting. All those things can be a completely different other segment. But you know, when you're starting at the basics, then, such as myself, if I tasted something, I know the basics from what you said with the senses on your tongue. I know whether it's too sweet for me. I know whether if it tastes too bitter, or I know that if it has a sour taste. So you'd start from there, and then you try and develop more of an understanding of your taste buds and your palate, correct?
Exactly, and people have really strong preferences for that. So you just mentioned that you like the drier wines. Absolutely, some people really want a sweeter wine. They really want more of a sweet style of wine, or a wine that is perceived to be sweet, because sometimes wines can be smooth but not necessarily have a lot of sugar. So that becomes personal preference. You know, I don't like Mars bars. I like Snickers bars. They're both chocolate bars. I just have a preference for one, and that's okay. Everyone has a different preference.
Okay, so let's go to the red for a minute, and I'm not too sure which of the Montecarn that we're showcasing here.
Yeah, this will be the Merlot blend from Montecarn.
And this one was the...
That's the Tippy Toe Chardonnay, and this is was oaked, I believe. There's light oak. That's when I said there was vanilla sort of aromas on that. That comes from that wine being in contact with oak barrels or oak staves. And so basically the oak is kind of like a seasoning. You sort of traditionally think of wine being in barrels as being kind of the romantic thing where you go to the winery and there's barrels everywhere. Not all wine sees barrels, but this one did, and basically it imparts a sort of a lovely smoothness to the wine. And for white wines, not all white wines are oaked. Most red wines are oaked, though. So there will be some of those similar flavors on this red as well.
And just go over this because we hear a lot about blends, and I think we've talked in another segment about blends. This is a Merlot. It's a blend, and what's the breakdown of this blend?
This is about 38% Merlot. There's portions of Cab Franc, Syrah, and Malbec in this. So Malbec, Syrah, Cab Franc, and then a large portion of Merlot. So he's called it the Merlot blend, and I've bought a couple bottles of this myself. It's a wonderful wine, and yeah, I'm curious to see what everyone thinks about it. So, and how it's tasting now, because I haven't tasted mine in a long time. So.
And then, okay, so we'll just have you swirl and do a smell, and then just give us some feedback on some of the things that you think you're smelling.
So right away I get kind of a berry aroma. There's kind of like a blackberry or a sort of a brambleberry kind of aroma to it, which makes it really interesting. There's a little bit of oak, so we get that vanilla, kind of a baking spice, or like an allspice or cardamom kind of aromas. There's sort of a dark cherry component to this wine. There's a little bit of an herbal quality, like a sort of well, just sort of like a green herbs, like not a minty quality, but what's the word I'm looking for? Sometimes my vocabulary escapes me, you know. And that's and that's the thing. Sometimes when I remember first tasting wine, it was like, that smells like and you know, you just don't have the words to describe, and that's a function of practice, first of all, and then in the English language, we just don't have a lot of words to describe for flavors and descriptors. You know, other languages have many more words. French especially has a lot more words that use different more eloquent kind of descriptors and stuff like that. But anyways, with this wine here, all kinds of things, and it's coming from all those different kinds of grapes. When you have a blend, you get little bits of each one of those grape components coming in, and it's absolutely fascinating. The blended wine is absolutely, to me anyways, really, really fascinating.
Well, and when we were coming into Montecarn today, which again is located on Black Sage, it's one of our newer wineries here in Oliver. Gary Misson, and thank you so much to Gary for allowing us to be into Montecarn today. But we noticed that there were some crates out there, and they had the pumice. I think I'm saying it correct, and maybe you can just mention about the pumice, because we did take some shots on that.
Yeah, those are the grape skins that have been pressed. So basically with red wine, the difference between red wine and white wine is that the red wine is fermented with the skins. When you make white wine, you're basically juicing the grapes right away, away, and then the clear juice goes into the tank, and then you add the yeast, and away you go. It turns into wine in 10 days or however long. With red wine, you don't remove the skins. You actually put the skins into the tank as well, and those are fermented all together, because red wine gets its color from the skins. So then once it's fermented, it has to be juiced, it has to be pressed off, just like the white wine did. And what you saw out there, those are the skins and the seeds, and those are basically the leftover components that we don't need anymore for making wine. It's basically given all the tannins and the colorants and all the stuff that is natural part of the grape. It's been used, and so we don't need it anymore. It'll probably become compost.
And it actually smelled really good. It was frozen out there, and it looked like a big wine slushy, and it did add really good aromas just in that crate itself. And of course, there's more information on your blog. You have a blog called Wine Country BC, and so if you're interested in being able to understand and learn a little bit more about the aromas of wine, how to smell and taste wine, perhaps you can just give the public some information on your blog.
Sure, I do. I've done a blog and a podcast called winecountrybc.ca, and that's the address for it. We're available on iTunes as well for podcasts, and we've talked about things exactly like this: how wines are different wines are made, different wine styles, we taste a wine with every episode, which is it makes it a tough job, I will say. But basically, it's myself and some friends of mine who are within the industry. I have some friends that have a standing invitation to come and chat about wine. And basically, we do just that. And I'll also interview winemakers, winery owners, talk to store owners, things like that, people who talk about BC wine and are interested in British Columbia wine.
And of course, we again want to give a big thanks out to Gary Masson at Montecarn for allowing us to come in today and hear two of his wines that received awards. And I think Gary is just in his first season, correct, for wine?
Yeah, he opened mid-July, I think, was the opening day.
And so already has done very, very well, a brand new winery here in Oliver, and we encourage you to come up and to meet Gary at Montecarn, and we look forward to our next segment, Talking with Wine with Luke. This is Margie Basso with Eastlink TV.